out there, everybody, and thanks again for joining us here on this new year show. First show of 2022 it is. It's right. It's me, Cam Hale. And as always, I guess it would be Baby New Year. He's sitting here in a diaper. Mr. Kyle Filio-Filson.
How's it going, everybody? Yes, Happy New Year. Welcome 2022. I can't believe
it's here.
How fast 2021 went, but it did. And I have to say, I'm glad it's over. I know that just another day, transpiring doesn't really change anything, but 2021 was a bit rough, not for just me, but for lots of people out there. It was a rough one, man. And you remember when the whole quarantine thing started in 2020? I had no idea it would still be going.
Yeah, nobody did.
I know. And
still going.
I think I had a run in the other day. I felt sick for about 3 or 4 days. So I don't know if it was the Omicron or whatever variant is out there now, but if so, I only felt bad for about 3 days.
My daughter-in-law caught it again.
Well,
she had tested positive, went through the whole thing last year, popped back up, had it again. Now, it was very mild, but was positive and quarantined and the whole deal. So, yeah, the Omicron got her.
I know. And
but she feels fine now. She feels great.
You know, I've heard lots of people say you can't catch it more than once. Other people say you can.
They're like Pokemon. You got to catch them all, right?
I think that they don't know. That's just the honest truth. It's just say you don't know.
I don't know. You know what I do know?
What's that?
I miss Betty White.
Yeah. Well,
right?
She had a good run.
Yeah, you think?
I mean, she had a good run.
I was really hoping it would go to 100, but I saw somebody had posted online something that was really great, and it said that she had the perfect comedic timing her whole career, and that this is perfect timing to have more drinks toasted to her than any other person in history. Huh? You think about it, it might be.
Yeah. I don't go out and party anymore on New Year's Eve, so I don't know how it went this year, but boy, coming back from a gaming session last night.
You want to tell them what our party was all about?
We were playing Dungeons & Dragons, like most Fridays.
That's right.
But as we came through town, there was nobody on the road, so it was pretty crazy.
It was nice.
Hopefully everybody was safe.
We drove through town late that evening, and it was the way town used to be around here.
Man, you ain't lying.
Man, it used to be easy to get around. Now our population's probably, I think it's since we graduated, almost tripled probably since we were in high school around here.
I know. And I really was a big fan of the town, but it's getting so crowded now. I don't know if it's my age or just the influx of people, but I'm like, man, I need to move somewhere a little smaller. I like the small town feel. That's the way it was when I grew up, so I still appreciate that.
Yeah. I tell you what also I appreciate, all the madness that y'all sent us in 2021, and we're looking forward to receiving more in 2022. Kyle and I have got all kinds of stories, all kinds of stuff. We're going to kind of OTC this one. This one's just going to be fun. We want to talk about what we did last year, the things that we've covered. It was funny. I had texted Kyle and I go, look, let's talk about some of the cool stuff that, like some of our favorite shows and favorite topics that we had covered last year. And that's all I left it at. And he comes over here and both of our lists are basically identical. And on the top of his was the same as on the top of mine, not deer.
Right. This is a relatively new thing to me this year. I've heard about it mentioned a few times in the past couple of years, but I never really looked into it too much until you did a couple episodes about that topic in 2021, and I found it interesting. I had no idea there were these sightings of, I don't know what you want to call it, like half man, half deer, satyr looking.
They look like deer, but they're not functioning like deer.
Right. There's lots of different accounts where like it looks humanoid and
maybe
deer.
That's the
Sometimes
name.
It just looks like a strange looking deer.
Instead of not deer, it should have been like deer.
There you go.
They're like deer.
But they're not.
But they're not deer. Which one is it? Not deer, like deer?
Right.
I don't know.
Very interesting subject. I had no idea that there was so much about it until I started looking into it on the internet and books and things. And there's been sightings of these things for a long time. And the question is, what is it? What are people seeing? Is this, in fact, a skinwalker or Wendigo or some other nature spirit? Is it something from the Fey world that we're seeing? Is it something extraterrestrial? Is it something demonic? Is it just a figment of our imagination? It's a hallucinogen, something that we hallucinate. For whatever reason, people see the same thing. I don't know. Lots of different theories. If you're coming to this show to learn or get an answer, you've come to the wrong place.
There's things you will not learn here, which you won't learn anything about that. You won't learn how to pronounce names of towns properly. You're not going to learn that here. No. There's a lot of things. There's probably pretty much nothing you're going to learn here except how not to do a podcast, how not to hang out with your friends.
Yeah.
I was surprised with the whole not deer thing at the number of listeners that have had encounters or have seen something along those lines that never really even talked about it. We would get messages after the thing about, hey, I saw something like that. It never really crossed my mind until hearing that.
Right.
Like I didn't put two and two together. It's like, man, there's something wrong with that deer, or something's going on. And then they heard everybody talking about it in the other stories and realized like maybe they did have something wacky happen.
Right. We'd received several emails from people with their own sightings. And then the question started coming in from listeners out there about this is what's responsible for the missing 411 books, of people going missing. It was these not deer. You start running into the possibilities of abductions and alien abduction and stuff like that. Were these not deer? And I've also heard theories that were sent in to us about people that's why what the not deer is. It's something trying to mimic an animal of Earth, but they just didn't pull it off right.
They don't.
It's say the aliens have some ability to try to disguise themselves to look like something that's on planet Earth, but they mess it up somehow. Well, because it's like the twitching or the legs don't move right, or it's traversing 50 yards, but it looks like it only took 4 steps. There's just weird things.
Well, another thing is odd is that it's the folklore of the not deer comes out of the Appalachian Mountains, right? So you get a lot of it through the Carolinas.
Is that where it started?
Yeah, that's where a lot of this fired up, was all through Appalachia. So there's a lot of it all through the mountainous areas. You'll see stories that come from that area. Now, we've received them from around the United States. We've received not deer sightings in different areas from east to west, north, south. We get them.
Alberta, I remember that one guy has a website up in Alberta.
Oh, yeah. But there are a lot that come through there, and it always makes me think, because if you look, folks, if you do any research and start looking, and it's usually tied to the missing 411 stuff, there is a map, like the map that he published, where all the missing clusters of people are, and there's another map of all of the cave systems in North America, and if you overlay those maps, they're eerily similar.
See, that's creepy.
And then I always wondered if you started taking a lot of the sightings that people have either through the Appalachians or whatnot and overlaying those and start looking at all this, how close those are to the same clusters.
Well, I know that there's been documentaries made about like creepy goblinoid-like creatures that are underground dwellers there in the mountains of Appalachia. What was that one? Hellier? By the Newkirks, that was done. That was kind of like some goblin-like creature that was apparently in there. There's folklore in the deserts of the ant people living underground. And then when you start thinking about all the caverns, like Carlsbad Cavern, and how I don't even know if they have all of that even mapped out yet, that it's miles upon miles upon miles. Who knows? Maybe the stories of inner Earth and all that aren't that crazy. Well, maybe they're exaggerations, but there is underground dwellings with living creatures. I'm talking about a sun under the ground and all that, but it makes you wonder.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you is that a good explanation? Because for me, that is a very interesting, I guess, theory or explanation to it, is that there, how we have talked about devolved humans, and we have talked about all the wild men of the woods. We've done stories about it. And again, there's a lot of it up through the Appalachians, right?
Right.
So could it have been, it's as good a place as any to start in all this cave system. Like if you're going to be hiding in cave, it's a good enough theory. I always go back to the Almasty story back in the early 1900s, right? Where the Almasty come out and the Russian soldiers shot them down, I always think of that story when you start talking about wild men in the mountains, like in the cave system. And then you remember the movie The 13th Warrior? Remember the bear people with the fire them?
And the thunder cliffs, waves make thunder. No?
That's it. Because the bear people like that, they lived, and I forgot the name of the book that was written after. Anyway,
it's a great movie. I've seen that movie probably, I'm not lying, 150 times.
It's free on YouTube. I watch it all the time.
I'm trying to remember, like back in the day, I want to say like 1997. Like that, literally, I had it on VHS. I would put that on every night when I went to bed, and I would end up watching like 30 minutes before I'd pass out. And I always put that on.
It's a good show. I like it. I don't care what people say. I am a huge fan of the.
Where he gets in the duel. Remember the sword duel, and he's like getting on. You start with 3 shields.
The shields, yeah.
And he starts doing. He's getting mad at his friend. He doesn't know that his friend's playing the other guy the whole time. He's making himself look weak till the guy gets over ambitious.
Spoiler alert for 25 years ago.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know why we're talking about this, but that's, and you're right. And there's these, if you look, there's underground settlements all over the world, like in Turkey and stuff like that. They found these ancient cities.
Like Derinkuyu.
Yeah, it's Cappadocia, I think is the one in Turkey. And it's miles and miles and miles of underground, like cave settlements.
Yeah.
And so, like, what are these stories come from? Maybe, I don't know.
Well, I did see something interesting the other day and read some things on it. And we're talking about Derinkuyu. They know now that some of course, this is really jumping off topic from the not deer. We've already shifted. Hold on, folks. It may be like this all day. If you think, that's what I was thinking about, is what they had said. If you look at Derinkuyu and they talk about how long they believe that cave system and all those buildings and all that had actually been lived in, they're not so sure that the people that built Göbekli Tepe didn't build that, weren't living there and getting all of it done and put away. And that was a whole big spot, is where they went when the cataclysm came.
Right.
So I wonder, and I don't know, this is just off the top of my head right now. I wonder what the elevation was compared to the ocean, water elevation, from where it's at now. If you had backed it down, that was super high ground. Right, where they built it. So that's so it's overlooking this. So a lot of these stories kind of make sense to me, but I'm dumb, of the whole idea of them living, people in the past have actually built it. And then it has been lived in more currently, just like we've always laughed about.
People found it later.
Non-Madal. Non-Madal is the greatest example, is all of this stuff's built underwater. And it's all coral, this stuff, basalt. None of this stuff should be where it's at. Right? They found fish bones at it that was like 2,300 years old. And they were like, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
That's 1,000 years ago is when it was like, no, dude, this thing's got stuff built by man that's underwater, like 200 foot underwater. So this stuff was built 12, 13, 14,000 years ago, possibly. Right?
Right. Exactly. Like if you were to go Mesa Verde, Colorado, to that Anasazi stuff, and you ate a Snickers, and then you threw the Snickers wrapper on the ground, and then 1,000 years from now, somebody finds that Snickers wrapper, you can't say, well, this was obviously built when that Snickers wrapper was made.
But that's what they did.
That just somebody came along later and ate that fish meal.
But I think that that's what happened in Derinkuyu, is I think a lot of that stuff was there. Then they kind of moved into it. So as I knock my iPad around, so take that iPad. So as using that information, rolling it back to the Appalachian story of the cave system and the people in there, then we know it's possible.
Right. And
not only possible, but it's plausible.
Was there an ancient civilization that knew that the cataclysm was coming? Like they had we already know they were very advanced in mathematics, astronomy, astrology, things like that. They knew this thing was coming. They had ample time to create these underground not bases, but places to live. Because just like today, if there's going to be a nuclear war, where do you go? You go underground.
Yeah. It makes sense, though, right?
Maybe they tried, and then they left those surfaces after it cooled down. Like say something hit, wiped out the Earth or most of the Earth. There was a nuclear winter. They lived underground for 5 years, and then came out when it was all the storm blew over, and then there was no reason to live there anymore. So they just abandoned the town, and you could still find the structures there today. Why is that not possible? I mean, to me, that's way more plausible than Vimanas and extraterrestrials came down and abducted them and took them to another planet through a Stargate. That story too. Oh yeah. Where they worship him. They took the.
Speaking of Stargate, how many times have you watched that movie?
I've watched it quite a bit, actually.
Here we go.
I most recent episode of it. The last time I watched it, I'm sorry, was probably 3 weeks ago.
I knew it.
It's a good one. It's a classic.
I like it. Yeah.
Kurt Russell makes some bangers.
Nothing's better than Big Trouble in Little China.
No, that's your absolute favorite.
I'll stand by that.
Tombstone's pretty good.
Tombstone's really good, but Big Trouble and Jack Burton's the best.
But before we change subjects again, I don't know how we're doing this.
Hey, it's New Year.
But about the not deer, other creepy things in the forest. One of the topics we've talked about a lot during 2021 was upright walking canids, Dogman and things, and also Glimmerman.
Oh, wow.
And we actually had someone named Garrett call in with his own sighting of a Glimmerman. Check this out.
'Cause 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 'c Hi, my name is Garrett. I'm from California, and this story would take place about 20 years ago. We grew up in Somerset, about an hour or so outside of Sacramento, heading up towards Tahoe. Our community was about 5-acre houses, 5-acre properties. I remember I grew up as just by myself, really, on the property, like playing around, and there was a shed that I would go play by, and our property was on a hill, so everything was on a slope pointed downhill. Everything was towards fall, so all the grass was dead and everything was dried out. I was playing by that shed, and all of a sudden the sound went deafening. Like, I couldn't hear anything. There was no wind, nothing. I really noticed it because a couple days before that, our teacher was talking about tornadoes and how it was the eye of a storm, and she was saying how it was completely silent in the eye of a storm. I don't know if that's true or anything, but that's what really drew my attention. So I started looking around. I wasn't hearing any birds or not even any of that tall grass. And then I looked down about 30 feet in front of me, and I could see leaves wrestling towards me in like just a narrow path, and you could see something coming towards me, and whatever it was, I couldn't see it, but it picked me up and it held me against that shed. I don't remember it hurting or anything, but it held me there for a few seconds, and I just freaked out looking, and then it dropped me, and I ran inside, and I was crying, and I in front of my mom. She wasn't really reacting too much, but after I talked to her later, years later, she said it was because she was experiencing stuff herself, and she didn't want to give it power by acknowledging it. So I think that house is pretty interesting. Everyone's had quite a bit of experiences. I have more stories, but I'll just keep it to that one. I know it's pretty not well put together, but it is my first time calling, and it's a little bit nervous. I enjoy your guys' show. Just want to say thank you. Let's listen to a lot of your podcasts, and it's enjoyable. Thank you.
And there we go. Very interesting. Whatever this was, it pinned him against the side of that shed or small building as a kid. I mean, what? And again, we get emails all the time where people are like, that the military has this. They have this technology. They can do this. I'm going to say I don't know that. I know I've seen some of the stuff people have forwarded to me.
Yes.
But it doesn't make any sense. Why would a guy in the Marines, say, testing out this new camouflage? Why would he go around and pick up a kid and slam him against a wall?
Yeah.
Why would he be inside someone's apartment building at night, in their bedroom at night? I mean, it seems like there's a better way to test it out. Because what if you tried that and then the person beat you up and now they got your suit?
That's the exact.
I mean, the data leak is just, that's not the way they test things.
That's the perfect analogy as to why it wouldn't be used that way.
Right? You're not going to give up that's why they have miles and miles and miles bought up out there in Groom Lake so they can test this stuff and people can't see it. Because if you say you're testing a new piece of technology, and this is you've figured out a way to build a UFO like Flight of the Navigator, a little 12-foot disc that one person can fit in. You can fly it around. You're not going to fly it over the mall in Las Vegas, because if something happens and it crashes, everybody's got your technology. You're not going to
go test it flying around China or flying around Russia in it.
No, you're going to test it over the land that y'all own. In case something happens, it crashes, and you can retrieve it, and no one's the wiser.
Oh, you mean like scientific method where you actually control it?
That's what I would think.
Man, that's weird, right?
When people talk about the maneuverability of these things, it's probably a drone. Why put a pilot in there? We're already saying that the last fighter pilots have already been born. There's no reason to put a human in it. You can only turn like 8 Gs before a human blacks out. But if it's a drone, it doesn't matter.
Not me,
It can
bro.
turn as tight until the like wings blow off.
Not me, bro. I got 12 G's in me, bro.
Is that right? Are you Maverick? Yeah. Well, with the story time continuing, let's first take a break. Stick with us, folks. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. And we're back with Expanded Perspectives.
Whoop, whoop. Hey, I got something I want to share before we go any further.
Before you forget.
Before I forget, I have a story here I have to share with you. You had talked about the canine, the upright. Who doesn't love Dogman, right?
It's quickly becoming one of my new faves.
Everybody loves Dogman. You can't put anything out. You can't talk about it. Everybody loves Dogman. So I found this, and Lon, God bless Lon, he has the best. Like Lon's, it gets dropped on his lap, and then he'll send me a message. Hey, check this out, and I shared it on the thing on the show's Instagram page. I love this story, and I thought of you instantly. And the reason I thought of Kyle is because we have talked about playing different characters in D&D, and Kyle was going to be a Tabaxi.
For those that don't know, please explain.
Yeah, for the uninitiated in 5e, the Tabaxis are like big cat people. They're not big. What are they, 5 foot tall?
Yeah.
But they're cat people. They're like leopards or jaguars or all this. Now, they are another race called Leonin, which are lions, but the Tabaxi are more along the lines of cheetah and leopard-esque, panther-esque. So when I saw this, I had to tell Kyle. Puma. I had to tell Kyle. Lon had posted this up, sent this, a 6 foot tall cat humanoid.
Yeah.
Terrorizes Boy Scouts at Northern Virginia camp.
Please, do tell.
A Tabaxi. It says, I have a story that happened to me and my friends. We were on a Boy Scout camping and shooting trip. There were 20 to 30 of us. We were in a little cabin with windows on the front and the back, and a front and back door. There were wooden tables all around the area. Now, the adult cabin with the bathroom was about 1/8 of a mile down a gravel road in the dark. There was obviously a buddy system, of course, because it's the Boy Scouts. So, it's around midnight, and everyone had been telling scary stories, like normal camping trips. Well, I had to go to the bathroom, and I asked my friend to come along, and he said, sure. And we got our knives, of course, because it made us feel safer. And, well, we went to the bathroom. And then when we finished, we began our walk back. Well, this is where it gets scary. I felt an instinctual, not sure if even that's the right word, but an instinctual fear. I looked to my friend, and he had the same look as me. We began to walk a little faster and unfold, or open, if you will, our pocket knives.
Mm-hmm.
I then turned around, and I see it. It looked similar to a cat, but it was 6 feet tall, and it was on its hind legs kind of hunched over. I freaked out and started running. My friend saw it too, takes off, so we sprint back to the cabin. You ready for this, Philly?
Not a smart move, because if you know anything about cats, if you quickly move something, they're going to want to give chase.
If you know anything about predators, period, and you run, it's instinctual for them to run it down.
But I understand why they ran.
Well, yeah, because just dumping in your pants really isn't an option. Well, it is for me. Says, listen to this. It began making a moaning, howling noise, like Kyle's mother. It was somewhere between the two, and it followed us slowly. So we pounded on the doors for the guys to let us in. We tell them what we saw, and they actually believe us. So we locked the front door, go back and look and lock the back door, but it had no lock. So we grabbed the table and pushed it up against it and had a kid there with his knife for safety. It says we closed the blinds on all the windows that had them. One window didn't. And we sat there with all the lights on.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
Then we see the eyes outside of the window without the blinds. Now we're all crapping our pants, and the thing is slowly walking around to the back door. We heard it bumping against it, maybe trying to open it, we think. It then left, but we still thought we were going to die, so no one slept that night. So when the adults came to wake us up, we told them what had happened, and they laughed and said that we were making it up. But we all know what happened, even if they don't believe it, or even if they don't believe us. Now, it says this was in Northern Virginia, about 60 miles east of Washington, D.C., and it was after 2012. I'm not sure the exact year it says here, and that was from D.
It's either
6 foot tall Tabaxi.
Well, I'm wondering if it wasn't one of the
Adults
playing a prank on a cabin full of scared kids. And they knew there was pocket knives. They knew they didn't have any way to defend themselves. It was just a really good, because that is very plausible.
if that's a gag, that is a great gag.
The only reason I assume that is because of like Gary Christensen's story. Yeah, where they pulled that prank on those kids.
Yep.
Those kids believed it. So this person, same thing. It might have been one of the other dads.
Could have been 10 years ago.
I don't know what they call them, scoutmasters or whatever.
Yeah.
It could have been them pulling a prank. We got a bus full of kids that are all from the city. We're taking them to the woods. We're going to put them in wherever cabins up there in Turner Falls or wherever. And when they're in there,
tuck them away.
Bring that mask, Bob. Bob's the biggest one. And when they go out there to,
how great
when
would
nature
that be?
calls, I want you to try to terrify them because nothing's going to happen to you. All they got is like a Swiss Army knife.
But wouldn't you tell them, even at the end of the day? I would
at the end of the trip. I'd be like, hey, that was, we had some fun.
We were like that night, you would tell them, hey, look, last night we were messing with you.
You would think, but the principal never told those kids about that.
That's the other thing that I lean towards is I'm like, maybe they just didn't think about it or they just laugh it off and leave it the way it is. That's one of those things like it's fun to do. And to use this as stuff to prank your friends. Yeah. But if you don't tell them, one, it ruins that person's life. I mean, it truly changes them.
That there's a 6 foot tall Tabaxi walking around in the woods. No, I would never go out in the woods anymore. Well, I think of like Michael Jackson Thriller. Remember, he looks more like a cat than a dog.
Yes.
That's what I picture they ran into.
Man. Well, and here's the thing, like we've always said before. It doesn't matter if it was a real like Tabaxi or if it was a scoutmaster playing. Either way, it had the exact same effect on these people.
Yeah, definitely.
It doesn't matter what it was. That's what they experienced.
Right, and we talk about that on this show all the time, is when people have these paranormal experiences, whether it's real or imagined, the effect is the same. Yes. It's something that the people are scarred with the rest of their life. Whether you thought you saw a UFO hovering in a field next to your house or you really did, the impact is the same. Mm-hmm. And so that's what,
100%.
These sightings and so many people's sightings that write in, that's exactly what they talk about. Speaking of writing in with a crazy story, this person didn't write into the story, but it is a guy that we interviewed one time on the show. And back in June 2nd of 2021, we did an episode about Centaurs.
Yeah.
Centaurs Rising.
Yes.
And we had been talking about all the various crazy satyr sightings and things like that have taken place. And years ago, we had a guy on that wrote a book called Goat Man, Flesh or Folklore. And his name is J. Nathan Couch.
Yeah.
And in that book, he wrote a story about a guy that he met one time who was a hunter named Jason. And Jason had a pretty cool story. It goes like this. It says, in the autumn of 2003, this guy, Jason, set up his tree stand off South Mill Road in preparation to enjoy some bow hunting. Now, when he returned to hunt a few days later, he discovered that the tree stand had been taken down and moved about 100 yards from its original location. There were marks on it that resembled hoof prints. Now, I don't know about the laws, Cam, in this area, but I'm assuming it's probably public land, and I know that there are people that hunt public land. If they come across your tree stand, they'll knock it down, they'll steal it. There's just jerks out there, unfortunately.
When it comes to hunting, especially.
So I'm assuming that's what Jason thought had happened, right? He put the tree stand up, went back a couple days later, and the damn thing's knocked out of the tree and moved.
Yeah.
So he says, thinking that it was a combination of another hunter's prank on him and the marks of some ordinary animal like deer, he said Jason put the stand back on the same tree. Now, a few weeks later, he again returned to do some hunting. He said he sat there hoping to spy a trophy buck, but instead, he saw something entirely unexplainable. He says the relative quiet of the forest was disturbing, and the sounds, there was nothing coming, except he could hear something approaching. He said something approaching that was just by the way it sounded angry. He said, looking off into the thick brush, he said Jason could hardly believe what shambled into the clearing. And this is Jason's quote. He says, it was the size of a deer. It was tan and gray in color, but it looked like a goat, only with a human head and arms. He said, I remember it had a beard that was gray and very long. It smelled like rotting flesh and garbage all mixed into one. I remember it was swearing. He says, literally, this thing was talking under its breath. I could make out it said something about trespassers. He said, what scared me the most was the sight of it. He says Jason sat there in utter shock as he watched this creature, his bow at the ready, should it notice him up in the trees. But fortunately for Jason, this goat man never noticed him. It must have been looking for some trespasser. He said, I didn't waste any time getting out of there. I left as soon as it was out of sight. I kept an arrow nocked because I didn't know what else to do, really. I had heard stories about how violent these things can get. He said Jason once thought of casually entering the woods, but not any longer. Jason actually told Nathan that I don't go in those woods anymore, especially not without any protection. He says 8 years later, some of the details are a bit blurry, but I'll never forget what that thing looked like. I won't ever forget it. So is it not odd enough that he saw this centaur looking creature, but that the thing was cursing?
It's got magic resistance also.
And it was mad. Yeah. And it was mad that he had put that stand there. Like, it was pissed that there were people trespassing in his forest. That's why it kind of makes me think of maybe Fae. Like the Fae folk they own the woods. They own the forest. Why do we
always come back to 9 years of podcasting, almost 9 years of this? We always come back to, man, it feels like Fae.
I don't know. Because how else do you describe that?
Because it does. It does feel like it's the exact same thing. Like that's what could explain it, is it's Fae. They can bounce between worlds. Now, it doesn't mean it's one type.
Right.
But they're all in that way. And what if the smell is just the smell of not of the creature itself, but you know how we always talk about you smell ozone at certain times, right? What if that's just a smell from the plane of existence it comes from?
Well, how many times are there sightings of Sasquatch where they mention rotting garbage smells? I mean, that's why it's called the skunk ape.
Yep. Joshua Cutchin's got great books on it.
Maybe it's not a Bigfoot. It's a centaur. Or, like you're mentioning, maybe that smell is associated with something coming from another plane of existence, whether it's Bigfoot, centaurs, satyrs, whatever. And is it not odd enough that he saw the thing, but that it was speaking in English? He couldn't understand. It was pissed. It comes stomping in like somebody put that darn stand out there.
What if whatever it says, I just thought about this. What if it wasn't speaking in English? It was speaking its language, but its language is understood by everyone. And the reason the Fae operates that way is because that way they don't have to know your language to talk you into coming into the Fae realm. Yeah, their language is more of like a siren. Like it's, like she calls you to the rocks. Their language is that way. They speak one language, but it's universally understood.
Well, and he also describes in the story, he knows how violent they can get. What does that mean?
How does he know that? I need more details.
Nathan never goes into that. Like, has people been seeing those things around there for a while? Like, what?
That'd be hard
I wish
to talk.
I knew.
How'd you get your leg broke, Kyle? Oh, I got attacked by a satyr coming back from the boat stand.
I don't think I would ever say that. I'd say I fell out of my tree stand or.
Again, that's one of those things, and discuss this with from Sasquatch tracks up there with Waldo. I was discussing it with him. We had talked about one of the shows that Micah and them had done because Waldo's not on there. But anyway, whole big thing. Anyhow, talking Sasquatch. And it was one of those deals. It's the same thing with the whole Fae deal like you're talking about. Why does Sasquatch feel so Fae-like?
I think it is. I think
you know what I mean. It feels like, why is there physical evidence?
Right.
Sometimes, like 90%.
Sometimes.
Yeah, but there's never that last little bit you need.
And they do kind of seem like stewards of the forest, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
Like they don't seem super harmful. They don't seem, I mean, I know there are a lot of missing people, so maybe that's what's happening. But
maybe that's not.
But a lot of people that see them, I mean, they're never harmed.
Yeah.
They just see them. And sometimes it's talked about how they're very human looking, and it seems just as shocked to see you as you seeing it. Other times people feel threatened, like they're throwing rocks at them. And sometimes it's even playful, like they're just throwing little pebbles.
Could be juveniles, like they've talked. You never know. My other question to you is this, though, is would you be, because we've talked about this before, I don't believe I would be, but would you be quite as blown away if you saw Bigfoot or if you saw Dogman or a satyr?
I would be less blown away if I saw Bigfoot.
Exactly.
I think because I'm desensitized to it.
Yeah, well, you've studied and thought about it your whole life.
It seems likely.
But if you saw a satyr
does not. Right. That just sounds completely crazy to me.
Well, then a 6-foot-tall tabaxi.
Yeah, well, that too. I mean, I don't know.
But an 8-foot-tall, giant, 400-pound ape man is, I get that. But a half goat, half man? Come on now.
That's why I say I'm never 100% in on anything.
That's true.
But I do meet people all the time that are. Like, they're 100% convinced it's real. And I'm like, I can't say that. I can't. Not unless I have a sighting. I cannot say that.
This is true. And
I've never had a sighting, so.
Well, I've got another story here from Mount Hood National Forest that has to do with Boy Scouts that I think you're going to enjoy.
Okay.
The Boy Scouts out there messing around. It says, I was active in the Boy Scouts for a few years up until about age 15. Our troop was fairly small and poorly organized with a scoutmaster who was a very uninspired old man who was known to drink a lot. Now, he often... That sounds great. That's the kind of scoutmaster you want.
Yeah, that's real male bonding.
He often drove us out into some real remote locations of the Pacific Northwest in and around the Mount Hood National Forest. We usually ended up being the only troop at campsites that were long neglected and poorly maintained at best, and we never attended any scout jamborees. The one criteria that seemed to matter to him was the presence of some kind of single occupancy shelter, like an old mini cabin or some standing structure that he could hole up by himself with his little propane heater, folding cot, and Canadian mist. We usually saw him twice a day for breakfast and dinner. The rest of the time we fended for ourselves, and the dynamics of our troop sometimes devolved into something along the lines of Lord of the Flies. During my time in that troop, on 2 occasions, my friend and I came across some very distinct 5-toed, very human, very huge prints. One grouping was located on the far side of a lake, accessible only by canoe, which at one point we had to drag over a beaver dam. There was a muddy cove where a creek drained into the lake. We were marveling at all of the fresh and various animal tracks imprinted in the mud. Bear, deer, cougar, some bobcat, and when we noticed the improbable bear humanoid prints that were ridiculously huge. Now, we looked at them very closely, and I'll never forget observing the fine detail within the prints that were pressed in quite deep. My friend said at the time the creases inside the prints looked similar to what you'd see on the palms of your hands or the bottoms of your own feet, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Says both my friend and I were aware of the Bigfoot legends, but we never took it seriously. Shortly after inspecting those footprints, we both felt a little spooked and decided to hit the canoe and paddle back to our campsite. If someone had put in the elaborate effort to prank some Boy Scouts or campers with fake footprints, they chose a location almost guaranteed to never be noticed. That incident, along with another much freakier one in a different location, greatly changed my mindset as to the likelihood of these things being all too real. The other freaky experience also didn't involve a sighting on my part, but it was one of those you would have had to have been there situations. This very well could have taken place during the camping excursion, and location is where my friend and I found the prints on the far side of the lake. If not then and there, it was around the same time period. It was after dinner and the sun was down, but the moon was pretty bright. 2 other guys my age went for a night hike, basically just goofing around. One of the 2 guys, named Bruce, I also considered a buddy. He was in my grade and we attended the same school. Bruce was tall, husky kid for his age, and he had a mellow disposition and got good grades in school, so he was a great guy. But Bruce was also deaf, or significantly so since he had these old hearing aids that connected to a control box about the size of a pack of cigarettes. Now, I never saw him use sign language, but he was effective at communicating with rough words and gestures. Anyway, Bruce and the other guy went for their hike, apparently intending to go down to the lake and back. They didn't bring anything with them. They didn't even take a flashlight. I don't think they were gone for more than 45 minutes when they both came bursting into the campsite area in a total state of panic. I would say bordering on hysteria. Now, the other guy, that I can't remember his name, was shaking and sobbing and kept frantically looking back in the direction they'd come from. Now, what really alarmed me was seeing Bruce in tears. He had accrued a lot of deep wood camping experience and was no wuss. Both of them were babbling over the top of each other, making quite a commotion. It was enough to rouse our old troop leader from his hidey hole to see what was going on. We finally got some detail out of the guys, which was unsettling to everyone. Now, supposedly, they hadn't quite made it to the lake when Bruce felt someone or something was pacing them, paralleling to their path. Now, they said whatever it was walking between the trees. At first, the other kid didn't pick up on it and was bemused when Bruce kept trying to share what he was noticing. Now, they kept walking for a bit until the other kid became aware of what Bruce had been trying to explain. Whatever was pacing them was lying down footfalls massive enough to reverberate through the ground. I think what really scared them at first was noticing just how heavy the steps were that were keeping pace with them, as if it was stalking them. And whenever they stopped, it stopped. At some point, they reached a spot where there was wider spacing between the trees. Now, in the moonlight, they both saw the silhouette of a huge, tall, bipedal shape 20 to 30 foot away, darting between the tree trunks. Now, Bruce described it as taller than an NBA player, but way thicker than Andre the Giant. I don't even want to think of something. No. Where their stories diverged was after they both fled in panic. Bruce insisted that it didn't give chase, but his friend swore that he could hear it crashing through the foliage behind them, most of the way back to camp. Now, I should note that our ragtag scout troop included a couple guys a bit older than the average age in our troop, who were full-on bullies and considered themselves badasses. Now, both of these guys were real tools, but who would normally mock anyone for being a pansy, and they were visibly spooked by the drama, nervously shining their flashlights around the dark perimeter of our campsite. But of course, neither of them volunteered to venture out and investigate. Now, our old scoutmaster looked a bit rattled also, but since this was not the typical drama he usually had to contend with, I think seeing Bruce in such a state of fear had an impact on him. I'm fairly certain that he believed at least those 2 scouts saw something out of the ordinary, something that scared the hell out of him, and thereby interrupting his evening with some booze. So it says after a few things finally simmered down before going back to their personal space, or the old fella, he told us to make sure the fire was out and to hit the racks. And he goes on to say here that at the older campground, the accommodations were very crude structures, tiny log cabins and yurts. Says there were no bunks, just a floor with wood planks, and the roofs were large squares of old canvas stretched and fastened across the top. These yurt cabin structures were drafty and cold and very uncomfortable. Says it was at least a couple hours before dawn when me and the couple of other guys awoke to the sound and feeling of something walking around the campsite, at times getting really close to the yurts. Now, I don't recall it feeling as being something massive or heavy, but 2 dogs were obviously freaking out, howling and whimpering like their lives were in danger. And here's where my memory has some gaps. Our troop didn't travel with or include dogs. My best recollection is that in that particular campground had some guy acting as a seasonal caretaker with a key to the gate, living in a shack or an old trailer a ways off from our camp, and he might have had dogs. I just don't remember seeing the person at any point. Said sure, the sounds that we heard that morning could have easily been from a number of critters, but the way those dogs sounded, it was really something. And then, of course, they go on to talk about how that it with Bruce, he was shook up and he couldn't believe it. And that Bruce said, here's what's really wild. Bruce left the troop after that. Said he went and did one more camp out after that, and then boom. Said over the following years, I saw him a few times in the school hallways, but never had a chance to ever ask him to elaborate on what he had seen. So Bruce just, whatever it was, changed him so much that kid was done.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so crazy, right? And what is it? It's common themes. It's somebody that's experienced in the woods, outdoors type of person that is terrified or knew the guy that wanted the boozer, as he calls him. It was an outdoorsman. He did not look like he was having a good time. He knew something was up.
Something was up, yeah.
That's crazy. It's like so many stories like that.
And just, again, how can you fake it? How can all of these stories be lies?
And there's so many. So many.
Well, just like the whole cat story, this person tells the Tabaxi story and thinks it's sometime after 2012, but not really sure. I'm like, they've been holding on to that story for a hot minute.
Yeah. Check this one out. This comes from a farm girl in the Ozarks in northwest Arkansas where, we've been. We went to the UFO Mountain conference there in, what was the name of that
Eureka
town?
Springs.
Eureka Springs, yeah. So we got to drive around that countryside, and when I was, reading over the story, I remember all the darn chicken farms.
Yeah.
Check this out. She says, when I was 15, back in 1973, we lived on an 80-acre farm in the Ozarks of northwest Arkansas. Way back then, it would have been considered rural, but that was only in my reality. In reality, our house is only 15 or 20 minutes from town, but it's a lot more populated now than back then. So I know exactly what she's talking about. Just like my house. I figure where I grew up was really in the country, and nowadays it's really not that far from the town.
Yeah, right.
But that's the way
mine was the same way. Everything's grown out to where we live now.
Right? She said, we raised poultry for a local company. Now, I'm betting it's Tyson, because when we were through there, everything was owned by Tyson.
There was a lot of it. Yeah, that's true.
And we had a long chicken house. Besides the end and near the driveway was a yard light that had pegs on it, so when the bulb burned out, you could climb the pole and change out the bulb. I went outside around 7 p.m. to feed our Alaskan husky, but unlike unusual, he was not at the back door waiting. I heard him whining and followed the sound toward the edge of our house where we had a tool shed and our root cellar. He was under the building, having dug out a spot, and would not come out when I called to him. That was when I smelled what I thought was a skunk. Cam?
What the rock was cooking?
Figuring that what had ran him under the shed was probably a skunk, I stood up, and then I felt as if I was being watched.
It was the hippie. That's where that skunk smell comes from.
So I turned in a circle to see if there was a visible skunk. As I faced towards the chicken house, I saw a tall creature with long, reddish hair all over its body.
It's James Conrad.
Its face was human-like and covered with a long beard and long head of hair. I could see it clearly as it stood right under the light, which later my mom measured that by the pegs I could see that night, this creature was about 8 foot tall.
You know how smart,
Yeah.
How does a genius thing to count the pegs had the wherewithal of this sighting to count the pegs and then tell your mom, and y'all go back and measure, like you had something where you could really
It's like the sticker in a convenience store when you walk out, it always has the height of the person.
Yeah.
So as they're leaving, you can kind of get a good judgment on how tall they were.
Yeah.
It's like that.
You need to have those around your place. If y'all have chicken farms, put those up.
Right. It says I was frozen in shock. I knew what I was looking at. Never a doubt. And it was looking at me. I glanced back towards the house to see how far I was to the back door and then back to it. It was holding something in its hand. It's got something in its hands. That was nearest the poultry house and noticed that it was a dead chicken.
Oh.
The next day, we saw where the screen on the poultry house had been pulled back. This creature and I stood facing each other, for a few seconds, which of course felt like hours, and then it turned and gently walked about 10 feet to our road gate that enclosed one of our fields. It stepped right over the gate. Now, at 15, I was about 4'11", and knew the top of the gate was at my eye level. After it crossed over, it took a few steps, then looked back at me, and then just kind of walked off. It loped into the field, and I could not see him anymore in the dark. Now, being a girl, that look back made me scream bloody murder. My mom came out with her shotgun, as we had seen a panther a few weeks before by our pond, and she had placed the gun by the back door. Now, after a few moments of jabbering nonsense, I was able to tell her what I saw. That was when she said she heard something scratching on the screen the night before. I was relieved to have been believed, but refused to feed the dog or go out after dark anymore. Later we learned a neighbor whose property backed up to ours also saw this same creature. After growing up, I often think back to that experience and what I had felt. I think shock and confusion was best described as what I was seeing. I think it may have been just shocked to see me, it. But oddly at the same time, up until it turned and looked back at me, I never really felt any fear, just in awe. I did not sense danger, and when it looked at me, I did not see in its eyes, which were dark, but I've never forgotten the exact details to this day. I do not believe they are monkeys or gorillas. It was too human, and it had an intelligent look to it. And just like other animals, when their territory is encroached upon, they try to scare you off. I think people looking for them have less of a chance to see them than those who just happen upon them. Michelle.
All I could think about was I saw a tiger and a tiger saw a man.
Yeah, the song, excellent song, yeah.
And a tiger saw a man.
So, I mean, we've heard of stories of Sasquatch stealing chickens out of a chicken coop, and I will tell you, having driven around in northwest Arkansas in the Ozarks,
and stole some chickens yourself.
It does look squatchy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've stolen chickens. Who doesn't like chickens? Chickens are delicious. And they're evil. They're reptiles. Like they're literally, the only reason they are mean to you is because you're too big.
Yeah.
You ever seen them turn on each other?
Eat mice.
Yeah, those things they're dinosaurs. They're little tiny feathered dinosaurs. But they taste good.
They do taste really good. I wonder if dinosaurs tasted like that.
Probably.
What do you think it tasted like? Tasted like chicken.
Let's talk more about it after the break. Stick with us, folks. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. And we're back with Expanded Perspectives. Yeah, man, the year was chock full of Dogman sightings, of course, Sasquatch sightings, and other strange things. But one of the things you brought up towards the end of the year were the sightings of gargoyles.
Yes.
And we had a fella named Dan call in with his sighting of a gargoyle. Check this out.
Hey, my name is and got a story about a gargoyle, I believe. Happened a couple of years back in the San Jacinto Mountains in Southern California. Me and some friends had gone out to try to beat the summer heat when we were teenagers, and we went to a place that we called the watering hole, where you used to be able to like jump off a cliff and dive into the water. Well, we go out there, we're sitting out there, and the dog's drinking some water we brought with us, and out of nowhere, this tree starts to shake. One tree out of a stand of a couple start shaking and knocking into the other trees. And the only noise I can describe it being was it's an elephant. It sounds far-fetched and it sounds crazy, but it sounded like an elephant. So we tell our friends, we hightail it out of there, get to the car, and take off. We tell our friends about it, and nobody believes us. So we go back out at night one night, me, my friend, and a girl he was kind of seeing at the time. We start to walk back out to the watering hole, and jumping out of one tree, flying across an opening in a dry riverbed to another tree, about the size of a Rottweiler with wings, and the only thing I could describe it being was a gargoyle. Flew from one tree to another tree, hit the tree, and shook it. Dead silent, never heard the wing flap, nothing, but it was just right in front of us on a full moon night. Never went back to that spot again, ever. My kid also said he'd seen something similar to that near a outdoor play area called the Ramona Bowl. Him and his friends were up there watching a meteor shower one night, big open parking lot, not a lot of street lights. And they saw the same thing fly over the sky. And me and my kid brother talked about this, I don't know, 10 years later. Neither of us have told each other the story. Thanks, guys, for all you do. I'm a local truck driver working 12 to 14 hours a day, and your stories really do help cut the monotony. Thanks, guys. Keep up the good work. See ya.
Well, there you go.
Word.
Out hiking, camping up in the great outdoors, and you see something in a tree that looked like an elephant.
Surprise. It's a gargoyle.
It's a gargoyle. So what, again, like you bring up all the time, what could somebody mistaken a gargoyle for?
You don't.
It's not like I saw a turkey vulture and I thought it was a gargoyle. You're like, no, it doesn't look remotely like that. What in nature would look like a gargoyle?
A gargoyle.
I mean, he said it was the size of a Rottweiler.
Yeah. In a tree.
Yeah.
The only thing I could think of, what are we always talking about? Like a big condor or something like that. It would have to be an anomaly. Now, I did see somewhere, and I think I saved it. Let me see if I can find it while I'm telling you about it, where they had seen...
The legends of the Thunderbird.
No, right here. This comes from Science Alert. I'm glad you brought this up because I had been sitting on this. There were some bird watchers up in Massachusetts that right before Christmas said that they saw a Stellar's, and I guess they maybe have gotten some photos of it, a Stellar's sea eagle, which, it's huge. It's a big sea, which everybody's like, oh, yeah. This thing, it gets up to about a wingspan of 8 foot.
Right.
And it can weigh about 20 pounds, okay? Mm-hmm. Which still isn't the size of a Rottweiler, but I'm just saying.
Still a very large raptor.
Here's the interesting thing about it. Its homeland is 5,000 miles away.
Right. Well, remember
it comes from Asia, y'all.
The giant eagle that they just recently found that they thought had been extinct for over 100 years. Turns out they found like 12 of them.
Isn't that crazy?
A giant eagle, like a large bird. So perhaps there is... The sightings of gargoyles, the sightings of these pterosaurs, pteranodons, maybe it's just some unknown giant bird. And it's not something cryptid. It's not something exotic, like from another dimension. It's not alien. It's not the Mothman. Yep. It's simply an unknown critter. I mean, is that possible still today?
I like to believe it is, but then again, I have that romantic Indiana Jones side. So I'm always going to be like, yeah, it's possible. And, if there's any, I really doubt there's any scientists listening to this or any,
there are.
But if there are, I'm sure y'all are like, these guys are complete idiots.
We have buttons from Mellon Carnegie University.
But that's just for the robots and the drones. That's not like.
Yeah, but those are scientists.
That's like saying,
Waldo, he's a geologist, right?
That's true.
Scientist.
He's a scientist.
Right?
He's a scientist. That's true.
We have lots of people that email wanting to know how to become a cryptozoologist.
That's true.
And, and if you are interested, you know how you become one?
Right now, if you're listening to my voice, I bless you as a cryptozoologist.
That's all it takes, folks.
That's it. You're done. If
you want to be one, be one. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to go to any university. You can just be one.
Just be one. Be about it.
Be about it.
That's it. But yeah, I mean, it's as good as an example as any if you find something like that in there. To me, something that flies or something that lives, like we've talked about, for some reason, if it's on terra firma, I would think it would be harder to find if it's like on ground as it would be if you could hide in a cave or if you can fly.
Maybe it lives underground like we were talking about earlier.
Why wouldn't it? Look at the pterosaurs that in the roping. You always hear these stories about them, like we said, flushing them out, only to find out that what we've reported seeing is what we've thought they look like.
Right.
Which is very weird in itself.
It is strange. And there's ground hornets that live in the ground. And these giant birds do too.
Did I read somewhere too that they believed now that the woolly mammoths survived in North America up to just like 3,000 years ago?
Well, remember there's that island that apparently there was still some alive only 25 years ago.
That's the story. Well, first of all, you and I had this conversation about what we think 25 or 30 years ago is.
Right, yeah. Go ahead. You were breaking that down the other night.
Kyle and I, if I tell Kyle I think it's 25, 30 years ago, I mean in the early 1970s when I'm talking to Kyle. But in reality, that's like 1991, man. So
I know.
We're in high school.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So I ruined Kyle's day with that whole, but yeah, it's the same thing. I like to believe, but I also want to believe that there is still a little fantasy, a little unknown things in the world.
I love the idea of somewhere in Siberia, there's a giant lake, and in that lake, there's an island, and on that island, there's still woolly mammoths walking around. I mean, I'm not saying that that's a reality. I'm saying, but I like the idea of that. Like, that sounds so cool.
I'm going to tell you my biggest.
Like, let's go.
This is something we've talked about it on the show, but we talked about it on the show several years ago. And we just did one thing about it. And it is one of my favorite of all time things to think about. And it is the tale of the inner earth in Antarctica, where they can see where the pollen was coming out of one of those caves, and it's warm air, and they got birds
directly from those caves to my nose.
Right. Exactly.
I'm telling you.
I like to believe that you go down in there and it's like that. There's like an inner earth, and there's like pterosaurs flying. Like you see, like what is it? What was that? Land of the Lost?
Yeah.
Like that's what it looks like. I want to believe that that's a real thing so bad.
Slee stacks and all that.
I don't want to believe about slee stacks.
But that's just what I think when I think of inner earth.
But exactly. It's just one of those things. And like we said, it's probably not there.
No, it's I don't believe it's there, but it's a neat story.
But the story is so great.
I like those stories.
I do too.
You know what makes it is because all the world is pretty much almost all the entire planet's been discovered. There's not much of it left.
So
deepest parts of the ocean, stuff like that. Deepest parts of the Amazon. But like if we had been born 300 years ago, that wonderment would be much more real.
We'd be dead by now.
Well, yeah, then we wouldn't be listening to podcasts or things like that. But you know what I'm saying? It's like now that's what makes those ideas so cool. Is there still a spot on the earth where there is still majestic animals like that?
Do you think kids these days even have that kind of dreams? You think some of them still have it?
No, I think they're busy trying to choreograph TikTok dances or whatever else those kids do.
Wow, you talk about an old man statement. That right there is a hot take.
I don't understand it. I don't understand the dancing. I don't understand that.
All this fancy dancing.
I don't like dancing. I've never liked dancing.
But you're good at it.
Everybody is like, hey, man, do you want to go dancing? Like, no one's ever, in my 20s, ever said, do you want to go dancing?
This fool used to carry around cardboard behind the seat of his truck so he could pop out and throw down popping and locking at any second.
That's breaking. That's not dancing. That's breaking. You remember those old movies with the Electric Boogaloo and all that?
Breaking to the Electric Boogaloo. Are you kidding?
Man, I used to think those movies were cool.
You don't still?
Yeah, all right. They're a little cool.
Okay, yeah.
They're a little cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of cool.
Yeah, I'm right here.
The cold front just hit. It dropped about 40 degrees, and I am leaving for Colorado in a day from now. So
yeah, I leave in the morning.
You're going to Oklahoma.
I'm going to go visit some family in Oklahoma we hadn't seen in a bit. We're going to swing through Broken Bow and then go visit family. Just make a little quick soiree. We just want to go visit a bunch before we leave, before my daughter has to go back to school.
That sounds like a good idea. What you need to do is while you're up there, do some scouting and try to find us some good spots to do some fly fishing. We can go back in a couple months.
I need to also go back to Thackerville, find us some place to go look for the Dogman.
I'll pass on that.
You don't want to go Dogman hunting?
No, there are some nice medicine shops, though, just across the Red River that I wouldn't mind stopping at.
You're going to Colorado. That's where they got the jazz cabbage.
Oh, yeah. Well, as soon as I get up there, my doctor says I need a backiotomy, and, I got glaucoma. Yeah. I don't see too good,
The devil's lettuce.
I got anxiety. I'll find something.
Riding with your family, I think I'd have all of those, too.
I probably will by the time I get there. Right? You ain't lying. You ain't lying.
I can say that because they don't listen.
Right?
So we say anything I want to about our families. They don't listen to us.
No.
And none of them in our families listen to this show. You can say whatever you want.
No.
That's the joke. Joke's on them because they don't listen.
Yeah, right? Well, speaking of listening, you listeners, thank you so much for listening and keeping us going all these years. I mean, I can't believe you've already been doing it almost 9 years.
Yeah.
And without y'all, we wouldn't be able to keep doing this. So thank you all. If you want to help us out, please write us a review, rate the show.
Make sure you hit 5 stars first. Don't write the review and hit 1 star. No, 5 stars. We like 5 stars.
Tell your friends, tell coworkers. Sharing the show with others is the best way to make it grow. If you want more, you can sign up for Expanded Perspectives Elite. Just go to the website, expandedperspectives.com, click on the Elite tab, or you can go to expandedperspectives.com/elite, and you can sign up for that, and you'll get additional content, and not just extra episodes, but our entire back catalog, which is like 239 episodes or something over there.
Still there.
Full-length shows. If you like this show, you'll like that show. They're all about an hour long, and there's no commercials or anything over there on the Elite side. If you have any stories, please share them with me and Cam.
Please.
We'd love to read your stories and include them on the air. You can send those to expandedperspectives@yahoo.com, or you can call in like Garrett and Dexter did. The number's 888-393-2783. That's 888-393-BRUD, B-R-U-D. And I hope everybody has a good new year. It's starting out. I know if you guys got new goals that you're going to try to reach this year.
I don't have any goals.
I don't really.
You know, my goal is to just to keep plowing forward.
There you go. Well, that's as
Put
good
your
a goal
head
as
down
any.
and just trudging along.
Right. I want to get out of this whole quarantine mess and get this over with. But until next time, folks, I'm Kyle. He's Cam.
Peace, y'all.